Hey, sixth grade. Happy 2019, and here are your notes on finding the percent of a number. So there's two different ways that I'm going to go over on how you can set up the problems for this. One of them is you can set up a proportion and solve a proportion. The other one is you can set up and solve an equation. Remember, a proportion is two equal ratios. So the way I kind of think of this proportion is it's the part over the whole, and that's equal to your percent. And remember, a percent is always out of 100, so a percent out of 100. If you like keywords, sometimes a keyword that can help you set up this proportion is going to go with your part of is going to go with the whole. So I like to think of this as is over of is equal to the percent over 100. This 100 is always going to be 100. It's never going to change to a different number because a percent is always out of 100. If you want to set up an equation, you're going to use some keywords. The keywords you're going to use, once again, is and of. Is going to signify the equal sign. Of, remember, usually means multiplication in math. And then whenever it says, what is da-da-da-da, that's where you're going to have a variable. An important thing to remember about an equation, though, is that percents have to be written as out of 100, so as a fraction, or as a decimal. So if you have 5%, when you're writing it in an equation, you either need to write it as 5 over 100, or you need to write it at 0.05. That's only when you're doing an equation. If you're doing a proportion, you would just leave it as 5. For the first example, let's look at finding the part. So I'm going to go through actually 3 ways to solve this problem. The first one that I'm going to do is a proportion. So if I have 12% of 20 is what number? So of 20 is what number? And then 20%. So if I think of how I set up my proportion, I know it's is, or my part over of, which is going to represent my whole, is equal to the percent over 100. So if I fill in these parts of my ratio, I have is what number? Well, I don't know, so that's where I'm going to put my variable. My whole is going to be 20. So what number is 12% of 20? 20 is that whole. And then 12% written as a fraction is just going to be 12 over 100. This right here is exactly how you set up the proportion in order to solve it. The tricky part about this is just making sure you know which one number represents your part and which number represents your whole. From here, you're going to do cross products or the butterfly method. And just in case you forgot, that's where you're going to do x times 100 equals 100x. This is going to have to be equal to 12 times 20. The reason why it has to equal each other is because that's what it means to be proportional. And 12 times 20 is going to be 240. From here, to get x by itself, I'm going to divide both sides by 100. And then x would equal to 2 4/10. Another possible way you could think about this is that 100 divided by 5 equals 20. So you could have done 12 divided by 5. Or you can write it as a fraction, 12 over 5. And you would have gotten the same answer. If you wanted to set this up as an equation, remember we're going to use those keywords of is and of. And we're going to take our percent and change it into either a decimal or a fraction. I'm going to go ahead and change this into a decimal. So 12% as a decimal would be 0.2. Remember, of symbolizes multiplication. So I'm going to do 0.12 times 20 is equal. What number? What? I don't know. I'm just going to put my variable x there. In order to solve this, the only thing that you have to do is 12 hundredths times 20. And if you multiply that out, you will come up with 2 4/10 once again. Anytime it says like a percent of a number, like this right here, that's also a way that you can tell that you are just going to be taking that percent either as a fraction or a decimal and multiplying it by 20, just like what we did here. That's how you would find the part. The way that we set these up is going to be very similar from one to another. So now let's look at finding the whole. So if we have the problem 96 is 8% of what number? If we're going to set up a proportion, let's think about the way that the proportion should be set up. So we know it's going to be part over whole equals percent over 100. We know part can be indicated by the word is and whole can be indicated by the word of. So then to set this up, I have of what number. So of what number, that means that's my whole. So I don't know what the whole is. I don't know what the 100% is in this case. But I know 96 is, and the is can come before or after. The of can also come before or after the number. 96 is going to represent that part. 96 is 8% of the number. So then if I wanted to set up my proportion, I would do 96 over x is going to be equal to 8 over 100, because this 8% as a fraction is going to be 8 over 100. If you want to simplify this before you even solve the problem, that's totally okay. You can 100% do that. Otherwise, from here, you can go ahead and solve it. You can use mental math and see the relationship between 8 and 96. Or you can do cross products and do 96 times 100, which is going to be equal to 8 times x, and then solve it for x from here. And when you finish this, you should get the number 1200 as your final answer. For this, once again, if you wanted to set it up as an equation, you could totally do that. Remember, is signifies equal, of is going to signify multiplication, and then you would have 96 equals, 8%. Got to change that either into a decimal or a fraction. I'm going to go ahead and change it into a decimal. You can do whichever one you prefer. Times what number? I don't know what that is. So I'm just going to put a nice little variable x right there. Once again from here, if you were setting it up as an equation, you would go ahead and get x by itself by dividing both sides. And then you would be done and you would get the same exact answer for that one. If you have questions on either of those two that we just went over, please make sure you let me know. Those are very similar to one another in the way that one of them you're finding the part, the other one you're finding the whole. And if neither of the strategies make sense, also let me know. So we can either try another strategy or we can review one of them. So the last type of problem that we're going to find is finding the percent. An example of this could be if I have 2 and 88 hundredths is what percent of 72. So I'm going to set this up as a proportion, and just to kind of make myself remember, and it's good practice, I'm going to do the part which can be represented by the word is over the whole, which can be represented by the word of, is equal to my percent over 100. So when I go ahead and fill in these numbers, I know my part is equal to 2 and 88 hundredths. The whole is 72. And since I don't know the percent, that's where my variable is going to be, over 100. Another thing I want to point out in this is you guys know how to take a fraction and change it into a percentage. So if you wanted to do 2.88 or 2 and 88 hundredths divided by 72 and get the decimal and then change it to a percent, you are more than welcome to, because that will give you the same exact answer. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just do the butterfly method. So 2 and 88 hundredths times 100 is going to be 288. And that is going to have to equal to 72x. From here, I'm going to go ahead and use my inverse operations and divide both sides by 72. And if you need to, remember, you can totally come out to the side, show some work, and I'm going to get 4. However, the answer to this problem is not just 4. Since it's asking me for a percentage, I want to know what percent, I am going to make sure that I include that percent sign in my answer. So my answer would be 4%. If you use an equation for this one, you have got to be super careful, because you have to remember that your percents, when they're being multiplied in an equation, are written either as a decimal or as a fraction. So the two different ways that you could set this up, remember that is equal, of is multiplication. One way that you could set this type of problem up is you could do 2 and 88 hundredths equals, since I don't know what percent, you can just put x times 72, which you could write as 72x instead, because that's actually the better way to write it. But when you get your answer to this, so then when you divide both of these sides by 72, you're going to get x equals 0.04. So you have to remember to take this and turn it into a percent, because right now it's being given to you as a decimal. The other way you could set this up, if you wanted to set this up as a fraction, is to do 2 and 88 hundredths is equal to x over 100, because that's your percent over 100, times 72. Remember, you could write 72 as 72 over 1. If you wanted to, you could cross-simplify these two things. Or you could just go ahead and work through this problem. If you're not sure how to work through this problem, you can ask me and I'm happy to walk through it with you. But just know that if you do it this way, you're going to come out with x equals 4% right away. So either one of these would work. For all of these problems, I would totally suggest using the proportion. If you have questions on any of this, please let me know. Y'all have an awesome day, and let me know if there's anything else. Thanks. Bye.